Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. I like to make pendants, and sometimes to change things up a little bit, I like to change the bail on the pendant to make it look different and kind of stand out from all of the others. You can have a really pretty stone, but have just kind of a plain bail, and it just looks like any other pendant. So sometimes you can really jazz it up by changing things up a little bit. And so I'm going to show you 5 different kinds of bails. I've done a few videos like this before. They seem to be popular, so I thought I'd do another one today. I drew up 5 different kinds of bails, and we'll see how they turn out. So let's get started. So this is one of my design idea sketchbooks you can get on my merch store. This particular one has some information about different solder flow temperatures, which is kind of useful. Some of the other ones have gauge conversion charts, or millimeters to metric, or metric to standard to fractions of an inch, things like that. I find them really useful. One of the key features that I like is how it's got this kind of dot matrix in the back here, and it helps me to draw better pictures when I'm sketching up my designs. And it also lets me have a permanent record of what I've made. I filled up 3 or 4 of these now since I started the YouTube channel about 4 years ago. And it's nice to have a record if I want to revisit those pieces or see how I did something, because I don't always remember how I did it. So here's what I have in mind for today. So I'm going to do one that looks like a little horseshoe, and it's going to be made out of, I think it's 12 gauge square that I flattened out in my rolling mill, and then I curved it into a horseshoe shape. I'm going to use a little ball burr to make some little dimples in it here, and I'll probably solder on a little piece of the same stuff sticking outwards to make that little part of a horseshoe that sticks out. I don't know what that's called. But on the back we're going to put some loops, a loop here and a loop here, and then a loop down here to hook it to your pendant if you're going to put it on a pendant. So if you're a equestrian sort of person, this might appeal to you, or if you just want to make something that's sort of westerny, that might be a good one. Second one, I'm going to make, this is kind of a variation of what I call a sandwich bail, where it's got 2 layers of sheet with dividers. It's got a divider in the middle to keep the chain slot separate from the slot where the ring will hook onto the top of your pendant. I'm going to make this one like a little flame, so I'm going to use, I cut one of these out already to get the shape right, and then I'll use that to trace a new one, and then we'll cut it out with the saw and solder the 2 together. I usually use some either some little 16 gauge or 14 gauge round wire for these, and then a piece of flattened square wire for the divider that goes, it's going to go kind of right across there. So I'm going to mount a little bit of a little citrine. Where did I put him? Probably in here. This little guy. It's about a 4mm citrine, so I made a little bezel for him to save time since we're doing 5 different things here. So we'll solder that on there and we'll mount that at the end. And I think that'll be a pretty one. Third, I'm going to do just a simple one that has a little triangular piece of sheet with some loops on the back, one on the top like this and one on the bottom for the ring that hooks to your pendant, and then solder some balls on it, and then we'll just cut off any excess sheet so it looks like it's just 3 balls. Fourth, I thought I'd do one that looks like a little arrow, and I textured it with my rolling mill. I'll show you what I used. I used 18 gauge sheet for this one, and I just put a little texture on it. And I bent it a little bit, and then what I'm going to do to make the top loop is just bend this around, and then on the back side we'll put another little loop like that. So, but I thought, you know, let's do a little arrow that points right down at that pretty piece of jewelry that you're making, right? And then finally, I'm going to do one. Oftentimes I do nature-themed things, or kind of Art Nouveau sorts of things that have foliage kind of themes to them. So if you're doing something like that, having a little leaf bail might be nice. So I'm going to use just a piece of 22 gauge sheet, and then I'm going to mark it for the little veins going here with, I think I have a little screwdriver that I kind of filed into a nice shape if I can lay my hands on it. And we'll make those little marks going that way, and then a piece of 16 gauge round wire that I've tapered a little bit. I actually filed it a little bit already so it kind of tapers down. So we'll solder that on there. And we'll wrap that around to the back, and that'll be the top part of the bail, and then we'll put a little ring on the back like that. So pretty straightforward. I don't think it'll be too hard, but let's get started. So we got this guy. It's a little bit bigger than I had done, but that's okay. It was challenging with the flattened wire to bend this around into this shape, and what I did to do that was I used some bail making pliers to get a grip on it, you know, when I was bending it around here like this. One thing you got to be careful with on bail making pliers is, since you got a cylinder on the opposite side, it'll pinch a little dimple right there if you squeeze too hard, especially when you're trying to bend something in a way it doesn't want to bend, like something that's flat and narrow, so or flat and wide, I should say. So let's I think let's go actually let's solder on the little piece that goes right there. And like I said, I have the ends I cut off of this were made out of the same stuff as this, so I got a little bit left over here. I thought I'd just solder that straight up and down like that. So I think if you're interested in seeing my soldering and torch setup, there's some information about that. But let's go ahead and hook this together, and then I think we'll go over and use a little tiny bulber to make some little nail holes, or what looks like nail holes, faux nail holes. I just put that little piece in. There it is. Okay, so is that the pencil? One side look better than the other? I don't know. I'm just going to file the end flat here. You can use your miter vise jig if you have one of those, if you'd like to. I think I'm going to sweat just a little bit of solder right onto the end of there. So let me cut a little bit of solder. So I do something called pick soldering, and I use a titanium pick, and I will heat it up so I can pick up a little ball of solder on here, heat this piece up to the right temperature, and then put it where I want it to go. It's a really useful technique to learn if you haven't done that yet. I have a great video about it right there. You should check it out. It's one of those skills that took me to kind of a whole nother level. Once you can do that kind of stuff, I find it to be something that I use all the time, and it made it possible to do a lot of things I couldn't do prior to that. So let's see if we can put a little bit of this solder on the bottom of this here. I'm going to add a little bit more just so we got plenty. I think I got that pretty close to the middle. I think I did. I think that's probably good. So I'm just going to cut that off a little so it's just a little kind of stump sticking up. And when we're close to the end, we'll kind of clean that up and make it nice. But now I want to put some little dimples here, and I think maybe 3 on each side. Any of you farriers out there watching me can tell me if I'm doing anything too wrong. I want to make a dorky looking horseshoe. Okay, so let's go over to my drumling area and we'll put some little dimples in there. Okay, hopefully you can see this little tiny bulber I have on here. I'm going to try and see if I can make these pretty symmetrical here. That looks okay, I think. I'm going to call that good. All right, to start with, I made one little ring for the bottom. It's going to go right behind that spot. And then kind of 3/4 rings for up here. And I'm going to put those at the top of each of those ends of the horseshoe. So I'm going to pick solder a little tiny bit of solder on each of these, and then we'll position them on there. So just for the sake of ease here, I'm going to push this into the magnesia block so that that little backside thing doesn't fall off. Front side thing, I should say. Okay, so let's move the tweezers here. Okay, now I'm going to double check to make sure those are all on there pretty well. And then we can move on to number 2. Feel free to tell me in the comments if you have a favorite one of these. So I see we got loops up there, they're reasonably straight. Probably not perfect, but close enough. And if I feel like I need to after I polish this, I can always make those dimples a little bit deeper. And you could oxidize them if you wanted to make them stand out a little bit. So, but yeah, that's looking pretty good so far. Alright, let's let that one pickle for a while. And we'll do the little flame one next, I think. So, like I said, I cut out a piece of this 22 gauge sheet. And again, I made it a little bit bigger than I drew it, but that's okay. So let's find some more 22 and let's trace this on there. Actually, we could just glue it to it if you want. Let me see if I can find my super glue. And we'll glue it to it. Glue it to it. And we can just cut around it if we want. Oops, not there, Chad. Okay, well hopefully we can, that'll stay on there. I'm going to scratch a line around it just in case it comes off there, because once in a while something pops off. I'd love to say that I have a massive shop, but I don't. So you'll notice that my rotary tool area is the same as my sawing area. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so I burned off the excess glue on there, and then I just fluxed this. So I'm going to place this where I want it to go. Right there. Solder this on first. Later, after this is done and probably off camera, I'm just going to drill a hole at the center of this bezel here for the pavilion of that little tiny stone to sit in. And then I'll file the bezel down to the correct height before I set it. So, but since we're doing 5 projects, if you want to see how to do that, I have a video in my catalog that shows how to do standard little bezel settings for faceted stones. So let's use a little piece of this flattened, I think it was flattened 12 gauge to create our little. I like to have a barrier in the middle to keep the chain and the little ring from the thing getting mixed up. But I think about right there, maybe, kind of right along that pathway. So let's try and solder that on there. I'm just going to flux this whole thing. I'm going to put some wires at the top and bottom as well, so might as well. Alright, make sure we sweat a little bit on the bottom of this. That's pretty good. While I'm at it, I'm going to sweat a little bit on top of this too, because we're eventually going to put that top piece right on top of this, so might as well have some solder in place. Okay. Alright, let me find some little piece of 16 or 14 maybe. I'm going to try and cut these off about the same height as that. So you could just pick a little bit of more solder on there, and then we'll just set it up there, which seems like a good idea. So let's do that. Or you could also sweat it on the back of this. And if you need to, you can use a lower temperature solder, but I think I can probably get by with hard solder without having any real problems. Remember, there's already some solder on the middle one. So I'll get that filed a little to make sure everything's all symmetrical, and get rid of the excess sticking out of there, and get it in the pickle. So for this one, we're going to make 3 little balls that taper down and solder them to this triangular piece. that, and then trim it off, and then add some rings on the back. I'm just going to use a little bit of scrap that I've run out to make some balls. I actually have the other day I did something with some balls. Here's a little one we can use, or maybe the bottom one. Let's see if we can make some progressively bigger ones. Yeah, let's see where we're at there with those ones. And that's actually pretty close to that other one. So. Oops. Yeah, I just wanted to say. Oops, get away from that. Sometimes your balls just don't cooperate, you know? Sometimes if I want to file a flat bottom on something like this, it's kind of hard to pick them up and just file them on the file. So I'm using a piece of tape to grab it so I can more easily position it. Oops, that didn't work. You get kind of a flat side on it. I don't think I'm even going to try on the little one. It's pretty small. But I think the easiest way to get these on would be, let's sweat some solder on top of this thing, and then we'll flux these all, and then we'll position them and try and get them to solder down. Okay, so let's cut this, trim this off. I'm going to use a little ball burr just to work my way around it, so it looks just like 3 balls, or 4 balls, I should say. Okay, so I'm going to use the magnesia block on this one again, just because I can push things into it. Hopefully you can see this, it's kind of small, but I decided to use some of this flattened 10 gauge square, and I made a little loop in it, because that'll keep this from twisting too much on the chain, if we have a little bit wider surface. But for the bottom, I'm still going to use a little, well, I did have one, there it is right here, a little piece of 18 gauge round that I cut into a half of a circle, basically, or pretty close to half of a circle. So let's put a little solder on here, and then we'll solder these down. Well, let's cool that off and peek at it. Okay, so we got 4 balls. and 2 loops like that. So, like I said, I think this will keep this from, turning too much on a chain then, which sometimes you don't want your pendant flipping upside down all the time. All right, let's move on to number 4, which is our little arrow. So, like I said, I took a piece of 18 gauge, I cut out an arrow shape, and then I ran it through the rolling mill with a little texture plate, and I just kind of randomly chose one. You could pick whatever you wanted, but I thought this might be kind of cute. So let's make a little loop up here. I still have a few pieces of solder over here, so I should be able to pick some on there or on there, or both. And then we'll just put a little bit in that loop there too. I like that. So I may curve that a little bit more if I can get it to do it without dinging it up too bad. Okay, we'll clean that up and then we'll do the last one. Okay, so I told you about that screwdriver that I had that I could use to texture things, and so I want to create, this is my leaf made out of 22 gauge, and I want to create kind of downward facing marks like that, about up to the middle. Alright, let's see if I can find that piece of 16 that I had. I've since probably misplaced. So now I'm going to need to solder this on like that. I'm doing kind of a stylized leaf here. You could do something a little more natural if you wanted to. Spend a little more time making it fancy. Now you could, if you wanted to make this really viney, you could loop this around a couple of times. But first let's solder that loop on the back side. And when I do these bail videos like this, a lot of times it's primarily to get you to stimulate your own ideas. You can certainly use these ones if you want, but these were things I thought up in a day or two. And you might have some specific kind of design thing. Say you're doing a musical instrument and you want to make a bail that looks like a musical note or something like that. That would be totally cool and doable. So use these as a impetus to brainstorm for some more ideas, because you are probably certainly more creative than I am, and will come up with all sorts of great ideas. So that's pretty good. You know, something else you could do rather than soldering this to the back, if you wanted to use it as a way to mount a pendant on a, say, a beaded necklace or something, that way you could just loop it around the chain between the beads, to add your pendant to it. So that way you wouldn't have to unstring all of the beads to put it on. That's one variation. You could just do a simple loop going around the back if you wanted to, and just solder it to it as well. But this gives you some options then, if you do it like this. So, well, I'll get all those cleaned up and we'll set that stone, and I'll show you the final result. Alright, got things shined up a little bit. I might have a little polishing compound still on some of these, like I just noticed a little bit on this one. Cracks. But I think they all came out pretty good. Here's a little horseshoe. It's a little flame. You can see it's got the 3 different dividers. The little arrow. I noticed I did it in the opposite direction that I drew it, but that's okay. So here's the little 3-ball, or 4 balls, I should say. And here's the leaf. So I think they turned out pretty well. Tell me in the comments if you like any of them, or which one you like best. I'm always curious to hear, because my opinions are always pretty subjective, so it's nice to hear some other opinions as well. So as always, feel free to copy these or use them as a starting point for your own creativity, whatever you like. So, all right, I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. All right, well, that was 5 new different types of bales you could try. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you go. That really helps to get my channel promoted, and I do appreciate that immensely. I would also love it if you would go to my main channel page and check out some of my other content. I have about 700 videos now. Many projects, lots of skills, all different skill levels. So I think there's almost certainly something you'll find there that's useful or interesting to you. So I'd love it if you check that out and maybe subscribe to my channel. There's no cost to that. I do 3 videos per week, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday, and one on Saturday. If you do subscribe, you can hit the bell and it'll notify you when a new one comes out. So that's kind of handy. Before I go, I wanted to thank some groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters, and they are a marvelous group of people. They've built this really lovely community over there, and I think it's a nice place with a lot of artistic people who are really friendly. So I enjoy interacting with them and doing live streams and stuff like that. So I think it's a great place, and I want to thank them for making it that way. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. My other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 27,000 people. That's amazing. I can't believe that when I hear that number. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for all the lovely comments. I've met some of the nicest people through my YouTube channel, and I do really appreciate that. I appreciate also your input on things, your constructive criticism, sharing your stories. How you do things is always really nice to know, because I learned quite a bit from you guys. So I appreciate that stuff. And I also appreciate your financial contributions, the Buy Me a Coffees, the Super Thanks, the merch purchases, or my ebooks. All of that makes my channel sustainable, and I couldn't do it without your help. So thank you for that. Finally, don't forget to visit the video description down below. There's information about this video, but there's also some important links. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out about the different tiers of membership over there, and you might want to see what it's all about. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks that I showed you at the beginning. I find them incredibly useful for keeping track of my projects. you should get yourself a couple. There's also some other cool merch over there too you should check out. Some mugs and some t-shirts and things. Finally, there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's video tutorials that I did last year. There's a page for each of the videos I did, and I think there's about 170 or 180 of them. So each page has a picture of the sketch that I drew, a picture of the final outcome, a link to the video, a list of materials you need to make it, stone information if there's a stone in the piece, a difficulty rating, and some notes I took about it, some things I might not have mentioned in the video, things I might have changed if I was to do it again, what I might have learned from the project, because I almost always learn something new when I try something different, or if I even think it came out well or not. Not all of my pieces turn out the way I hoped, so it's always a learning experience in that way too. So it's a great way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and a really nice way to support my channel. So get yourself that, and if you want, you can get 3 years in one package, 2023, 2024, and 2025 all together, and you save $15 that way if you do it. So it might be worth checking into. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.